Minnie, thank you for being with me here today. It's lovely to have you to have a conversation about charity status and information for nonprofits. And I know it's an area where a lot of people have information and questions about it. So let's get going. Can you tell me and tell our audience a little bit about who you are, about Impact Weaving, your journey to get here, and why you started the organization?
Thank you, Narissa, for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, a little about myself. So I've worked in the nonprofit sector and international development space for a little over a decade now. And I've had various roles from marketing communications. That's where I started off. I've been to policy and government relations. Recently, I was appointed by the Minister of National Revenue to the Advisory Committee on the Charitable Sector. It's been an opportunity to really understand the charitable space, the philanthropic space. So then after the end of my term last year, I decided that I wanted to bring that knowledge into the community. I know a lot of our community organizations that really are not aware of what the needs are. How do you get charitable status? It seems like a very complicated, convoluted process that only a few organizations have had the privilege of knowing that. And so really the purpose of Impact Weaving is to provide education as well as support community organizations on that process and on that journey of getting the status, as well as doing some fundraising work we do. And I love doing coaching. Coaching is a part of what we bring into the space. So yeah, that's about me and Impact Weaving.
So thank you for the introduction. Let's go straight into it. So can you talk a little bit about charity status? So what does that mean in terms of the difference between a nonprofit or a not-for-profit and charity?
Okay, yeah, that's a good place to start, right? Trying to figure out what is the difference, what happens when you become a charity status. So a nonprofit obviously does not need to go through the process of registration with the CRA, and that's what really sets things apart here when we start to compare the two. So a charitable organization is an organization that has gone through a process of registration with the CRA, and the CRA has determined that the organization is doing charitable work, that it is charitable at law. And what that specifically means in that language is that an organization that is charitable, it has aligned with itself in four purposes. So there are four purposes in which the CRA determines that an organization is charitable. So the first purpose is alleviation of poverty. The second purpose is organizations that have purposes for the advancement of education. The third one is the purposes of advancing religion. Now that is quite obvious. And obviously a lot of churches fall under that and any other organization that is doing religious work. Now, the fourth category, and this is where a lot of the organization, when we think about Black organizations, is any other purposes that are determined to be profitable and of the public and of public use. So what this means is that an organization, to be charitable, needs to go through this process with the CRA and really prove itself. Again, the burden of proof to become a registered charity lies with the organization rather than with the CRA. So a nonprofit does not need to go through that entire process. A nonprofit, you just say, we want to do work in community. We want to be able to work with the youth, the seniors, and whatever other group they want to work with. And they do not have to align themselves within any of the four purposes. So that really, in terms of the differences, in terms of how one becomes a nonprofit and the process of the journey that an organization takes to become a charitable status, that's really is what the difference is. And also when it comes to fundraising, a nonprofit cannot issue a donation receipt. A charitable organization, that is the primary benefit for any organization that is wanting to become a charity. It's able to issue donation receipts to individuals, to corporations. So it does have an appeal to organizations that are attracting those kind of people that are motivated to give in return for a donation receipt.
Okay, so perfect. So then, if I'm a nonprofit and my mission doesn't necessarily fall within one of the four brackets you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Does the entire mission have to fall there, or are there activities that you do as a nonprofit that could be translated then to a charity? Or what does that look like if I'm in, for example, we're a business organization.
Yeah.
Are there activities that we run as a business organization that could be considered under one of the four pillars of a charity where that would allow us to apply for charity status?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to start off, as a private company, you do not qualify for charitable registration.
Right.
So what you might, or any other organization might consider to do, is establishing a charitable organization in which all the activities that you are engaging in fall within either of the four purposes. And again, with the purposes, you have the activities that are advancing those purposes.
Right.
So I hope that makes it clear in terms of, as a business, you may not qualify, but if you were to create an organization out of the activities that you're doing that would benefit the public and would be completely charitable and separate from the business, that would be possible.
So we could run a business and a charity, or we could run a not-for-profit and a charity at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. That's okay. Of course, it's about understanding that the three need to be separate.
Right.
Whether it's record keeping, they would have their own record keeping. The board of directors, the governance is very important. Remember that the CRA is very concerned about organizations making sure that they are of public benefit. So private benevolence immediately disqualifies an organization that has any perceived or direct private benevolence to the members or to any associated individuals with that organization.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Now, if an organization says, okay, yes, I want to go forward and continue on to get my charity registration, what are the steps that they need to take to prepare themselves for that type of application, and how long generally does that process take?
Okay, let's start with the easy part.
Yeah.
How long it takes.
Yeah.
So the process takes anywhere between 6 months to 9 months. That is the standard service that you get from the CRA. And it really is a factor of many things. It depends on the season in which you apply. Perhaps the CRA has received a lot of applications, so that's going to have an impact because they don't have a necessarily large department that they can easily add more people to look into the applications. And it also depends on how fast the CRA is able to verify information. So this process is a very important process for the CRA to be able to determine that really an organization is eligible and that the activities are showing that there is public benefit, again, excluding any private benevolence. So there's going to be a lot of research that
and
the officer...
do they come back and forth with
yes,
you?
They
do
do.
They ask you questions?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And that's good. That's the next part of what is going to determine how long the process is going to be. The CRA, 99% of the time, will always come back with questions.
Yeah.
They want to know, tell us more about this activity. Who is participating? How do you select? So on and so forth. So they will have questions, and that's okay, because it doesn't mean that your application is not complete. They just want to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so the sooner you get back to them, the better. So that's the other factor that determines how long this process is going to take.
Okay.
So what an organization needs to prepare is, number one, get educated on what it means to be a charitable organization.
Right.
Really understand what the responsibility is going to be for you, whether you are prepared internally. And think about, we talked about the purposes. You need to be very clear that the activities your organization is undertaking can be able to fall under the four purposes.
Right.
Now, the CRA has a lot of resources to help organizations understand that, but we know it's not enough. And it's a bit all over the place. And you've got to know how to look for it. So what we've done is that at Impact Weaving, we've created webinars. We do webinars now every month. And we want to bring this education to people. This is the part about getting prepared, is get the information, really understand what it means to be eligible. Because again, not all nonprofits are eligible.
Right.
You can be a nonprofit, but you are in business. that means that you are not eligible, although you're a nonprofit. So our webinars really go into details to help organizations understand what all this means, and also give you an idea of, okay, what are your activities? This is how they could actually fall under education. So for instance, if you're an organization that is doing research on anti-racism, and you do that research, you put it out in the public, your activities can actually fall under the purposes of advancement of education.
Right.
So yeah, it's the bit about getting prepared, getting to understand. And I want to plug that next Friday, March 14th, we're going to have a webinar, and we are going to be talking about these issues. The other way to get prepared is have conversations with your team and really understand how are our activities going to fall under the purposes, because it's very important. Again, as I said at the beginning, the burden of proving that you are eligible, absolutely, is on the organization. So you really need to get your ducks in a row.
Right.
You need to make sure that, of course, you have your financials. Financial is the other sort of documentation that you need to provide. So you need to know that that is ready. You're ready to open up the books.
What if you're a new organization and you don't have a year's of financials yet?
Well, if you don't have that, the CRA has requirements for every, and they tend to be from province to province in terms of the documentation that you need to provide. But certainly there will be something that you need to provide around that. The other thing is that there's always a requirement for a budget, a 12-month budget, that you need to demonstrate what you're going to do with the money. And again, they need to know that there is no private benevolence, and that's the purpose for these statements anyway at the end of the day. So I would say that that's what an organization needs to do. It needs to understand that we want to get into this, and these are the activities. Sometimes I know in our community we have mission drifting, and so organizations are moving from one project to the other, and there needs to be a way of consolidating as you go into this process and saying, this is what we want to, this is what we've been doing, this is what we want to focus on going forward, and making it very obvious that all the other activities that you're doing are actually contributing to specific purposes. And again, it doesn't have to be one out of the 4 purposes. It can be 1 or 2. Many organizations have 2 to 3 purposes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's really great information, and I think it's important to understand how to prepare as you go into getting yourself ready to apply to be a charity. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of having a strategy around your goals for your charity, maybe over like 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 years?
Right.
Like how does that play into ensuring that the reason you chose to start a charity, that is going to be beneficial, and that is you're going to meet your mission as you go forward?
Yeah, let me see if I understand that right. So in terms of understanding the strategy of getting yourself ready for the process and the activities?
Well, the strategy of how can you utilize that strategy to grow, like utilize the fact of being a charity to grow your mission.
Okay, I get it. So now you have gone through the process and you have your charitable number, your registered charity. What that means is you need to understand the power that unlocks, that a lot of organizations have yet to understand, is that there are still so many foundations today that are not granting to nonprofits. They only grant exclusively to charitable organizations. And I know in 2022, we did a lot of advocacy on Parliament Hill, meeting with political parties there, the leaders, and trying to make them understand that it's now time to change the rules to allow foundations to grant to non-qualified donees, meaning nonprofits and other grassroots organizations. We've done the work, and now it's possible. There's a guidance that allows foundations to grant to nonprofits. However, that is a process. Foundations need to change their purposes. Remember, with a CRA, you have to make sure that what you're doing is aligned to your purposes.
Right.
So there are foundations whose purposes are exclusively funding registered charities. So for them to fund non-qualified donees, they need to go through the process. And right now, it's not easy.
Right.
It's not easy for many reasons. They're still waiting for the CRA, still waiting for more guidance. Some organizations are still like, we are trying to do this. There's a bit of reticence in the sector that, I don't know, it's risky. The CRA in the guidance had so many words. We counted the words, and it was 49 words on risk.
Yeah.
So just how risky they think it is for foundations to fund
non-qualified.
Yeah. So even though this new guidance is out, there's a bit like, oh, I don't know, foundations are not very sure they want to go that route. So what anyway that means for a registered charity is that you have already unlocked those doors. You've gone off of that. So
that hurdle is gone for you.
It is. Yeah. It is. So it's not a barrier to you anymore. As the sector tries to figure out that, you're able to go to foundations and say, I have a registered charity. And I see you fund registered charities. So you now have unlocked for yourself 2 funding streams. So you can still get grants from organizations that have already accepted, and there's so many now, have accepted to fund both nonprofits and charities. So you're able to go to them, and you're able to go to those that fund exclusively to registered charity.
Right.
So the opportunity is really the diversification of your revenue in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. That's fantastic to know. And I think once you realize that your mission aligns and with one of the 4 pillars of charity status, and you're fine with the documentation that comes along and the rigor that comes along with being a registered charity, I think it's a fantastic option. Now, does Impact Weaving offer one-on-one support, or is it just through webinars that you impart that type of support information?
Yes, we do. We do. Yeah, we do one-on-one. We've had a lot of requests since we've been doing webinars to help people do one-on-one. So we take in clients.
Okay. Yeah. And beyond the one-on-one, do you help to also facilitate the entire process of the application? Do you have services where you will support them on the entire application process? Yes. And that's what I meant, that we do one-on-one. So we work with organizations on a one-on-one basis and making sure we give you a checklist depending on your province, depending on when you were registered. For instance, here in BC, there's different documentation if you were incorporated before the Societies Act and after the Societies Act. So we help you figure out what documentation you need. We help you figure out what purposes you're going to align your organization with, because it's not an easy thing to try and figure out, okay, I'm doing these activities. Organizations many times understand the activities they're doing, but they would not necessarily be able to identify the purposes, the charitable purposes under which the activities would fall under. So we do that work, and we help in gathering more documentation. Again, that burden of proof that the organization needs to have to be able to prove that they are actually eligible. So we do that entire process. We help you fill out the application question by question. We help you put in an application. Technically, it's an easy process, but it's just, making the submission and addressing any technical issue that may come up. And again, the CRA is going to come up with questions after you make the submission. We're there to help you respond to those questions. Again, the language of the CRA is not always as direct. It takes some understanding. So we're there to help organizations respond as quickly as possible to the CRA questions. Again, we don't want their applications taking too long. And what we've done is that after an organization has gone through the process, we have support. We have what is called a circle of learning, where organizations can continue to be with us. We can continue to give them support in issues like, how do you do a good donation receipt, right? If you have other questions now that you're a charity, how do you leverage that? So we'll hold workshops to help organizations really own it and really be able to use it to their advantage, to grow their missions, have even more impact. Yeah. So you have that full wraparound support.
Yes. Yeah, that's what we have. Yeah.
So we've spoken about the benefits of charity. Are there challenges or are there restrictions or things that, because I'm sure it's more restrictive to run a charity than it is to run a not-for-profit. What are those challenges that prospective nonprofits should consider when they're considering charity status?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of people, we have realized that that's what they see as a challenge is, oh, if I become a charity, there's just going to be so many things that I'm not going to be able to do. And it is a misconception, actually, because if you have been running a nonprofit and you become a charity, really nothing much changes in terms of what you're doing in terms of compliance. You still need to have a board of governance.
Right.
It's the same thing. You need to do your yearly return. With a charity, you need to do the T3010 return. So it's
very similar.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and we're still trying to understand why, there seems to be, people seem to have a perception that it is actually more rigorous, more. And like there are going to be so many other layers for you to be able to run it, but really the similarities are overwhelming in terms of compliance, making sure that you are staying within your activities. That's going to be key again with the CRA in terms of compliance.
Right.
The most important thing is that all your resources, your staff, your funds, your assets that you might have, all need to be directed to your charitable purposes. So you need to continue to do that. That is the most important thing.
And the purposes and all of that type of information is on the CRA website?
Yeah, it's on the CRA website. If an organization wanted to educate itself, say that they feel that their activities fall under advancement of education, you can just go to the CRA website and look for guidance for organizations that are advancing education. So there is information around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I would love to segue into what are your thoughts on how charity status can impact an organization's ability to fundraise and to increase their community engagement?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will start with the community engagement piece because that we have found is a really powerful tool. People have a perception that if you're a charity, you've gone through this rigorous process. So the perception and the credibility, perhaps the perceived credibility that of a charity over a nonprofit, that really does give organizations an opportunity to access communities and sponsors that they would not have been able to before. And this is tied to the fundraising bit where you now have unlocked an opportunity to engage a community that is motivated to give in return for a donation receipt.
Right.
And the community is big now. So you're able to fundraise within your community to start with because within the communities, people are always giving. So you can now tell them, hey, you can give, and in return, you can get a donation receipt. So you even are able to activate giving within your own community. The other thing is that now there are corporates, there are foundations that are wanting to give to registered charities. So you have unlocked another stream of revenue for yourself. And we know how important it is today for organizations to have different
multiple streams of revenue.
Yeah, that is absolutely. So that is so important. So having a charity status does that for you. And I think it's unfortunate that I know way too many organizations that have gone through this process but have not owned that piece. I've interacted.
Really?
Yes. I've interacted with many organizations that are registered charities. And I did not find out until later on. I'm like, you were a registered charity the whole time? It's like people hide the number, like even on their website, it's not there. When you go to their donation page, it says nothing to do that you'll get a donation receipt. It's like, how come? I think people are yet to realize
the power
that has, in being able to say, yeah, we're a registered charity, and this is what it actually means.
Yeah.
And again, that's the education piece, that it's not just going through the process and having a registration number, it's for that number to be able to help you to
Leverage.
mobilize, yes, mobilize, activate within your communities, outside of your communities, and it's it's recognized across Canada.
Yeah.
So you're really able to fundraise across the country. That's the real benefit of having this in as far as fundraising for your organization and being able to have even more impact on the people that you serve, on the communities that you serve, because you have more resources.
Yeah.
And the thing with donated resources is that you have full control of that. They're unrestricted funding.
Yeah.
Everyone is looking for unrestricted funding. Here is a way to access unrestricted funding. Many of the times, there are very few situations when donors are going to say, we want you to make sure that this funding is only used for these purposes. That rarely happens, but even when it happens, it's still a good thing for your organization because it's bringing in revenue to sustain your operations. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Minnie. I think that it's so important, as you said, not just to understand why why you should consider charity status, the benefits of it, but then how to use it on the back end to leverage to become a more sustainable organization because of that. So it's a really important conversation that we just don't have enough of, and we just don't have that awareness within our community and other communities to know how to utilize that as a tool for growth for organizations. So thank you for coming out today and chatting with me and sharing this information. And we'll be sharing your organization Impact Weaving and all the support that you provide to organizations to get them to that charity space.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to get more people to understand what this process is about, the opportunity that it brings to the organization as well. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.